They were supposed to find her bones. That was the plan. 4 days in the Forbidden Wastelands. No water. No rescue signals. No official records. Princess Vilara Siren of the Etherian Empire was meant to disappear quietly, erased not just from history, but from memory itself. But on the 3rd day, when her breathing slowed and the twin suns burned the sky white, a human stepped into the canyon. And everything changed. The wastelands were not natural. They were engineered. Long before humanity entered galactic politics, the Etherian Empire had used the outer territories as controlled dead zones, places without surveillance grids, without emergency beacons, without witnesses. Regions where political problems could be resolved without scandal. Jonah Hale knew none of that. He was just a human frontier ranger. A former Earth climate engineer who left the comfort of planetary cities to map unstable ecosystems across alien border worlds. Humans had earned a strange reputation among older empires. They were fragile, short-lived, reckless. But they adapted. They always adapted. Jonah was conducting soil regeneration scans when his portable sensor flashed something impossible. A life sign. Weak. Fading. 3 kilometers into a canyon officially marked as uninhabitable. He hesitated only a second. Then he ran. The canyon walls shimmered with heat distortion. Razor rock cut through his boots. But he kept moving. When he found her, she looked less like royalty and more like a broken sculpture left in the dust. Silver-blue skin cracked from dehydration. Delicate neural filaments dim along her temples. Her ceremonial markings had been burned away, deliberately removed. She had been stripped of identity. Jonah dropped beside her and scanned her vitals. Critical. 4 days without hydration. Internal damage. Microfractures from forced transport impact. Someone had not just abandoned her. They had calculated her death. Her eyes opened weakly. "Don't take me back," she whispered. Her voice carried authority even in ruin. "I'm not here to take you anywhere," Jonah said calmly while injecting hydration stabilizers. "I'm here to keep you alive." Her eyes focused slowly. "You're human." There was surprise in her tone. "Yes." A faint, almost bitter smile touched her lips. "They said humans were unpredictable." "Sometimes that's useful," Jonah replied. She passed out again. For 12 hours, Jonah fought nature itself. He built a thermal barrier from emergency foil, extracted trace water from mineral pockets, repaired her cellular dehydration using field med protocols adapted from Martian survival research. Human science was young compared to galactic empires. But it was stubborn. And creative. When she finally stabilized, he lifted her carefully and began the long walk back to his mobile camp. She regained consciousness during the night. "My name was Vilara Siren," she said softly. "First daughter of Emperor Kale Tharian." Jonah paused. "Was. That's a heavy title," he said. "Not anymore." He waited. She continued. "I told them the truth." The words were heavy. "Our expansion is killing us. We consume star systems faster than they regenerate. We stretch our fleets thinner each cycle. Our economy depends on constant conquest. When expansion stops, the empire collapses." Jonah listened quietly. Humans understood that math. Earth had nearly destroyed itself the same way centuries ago. "They called it treason," she said. "Said I weakened imperial confidence." "And instead of fixing the problem," Jonah said, "they removed the person pointing at it." She nodded slowly. "They needed growth, not truth." Silence filled the canyon. Jonah adjusted her stabilizers. "You were right," he said. She looked at him sharply. "You haven't seen the data." "I don't need to," Jonah replied. "Humans ran that experiment already." That caught her attention. "Your species collapsed." "Almost," he said. "We hit the wall. Resource exhaustion. Climate instability. Political denial. But we changed." "How?" He smiled slightly. We stopped pretending infinite growth was possible. She stared at him like he had just described magic. No empire chooses contraction, she whispered. Humans did, Jonah said. It was messy, painful, but we survived. For the first time since he found her, something other than despair flickered in her eyes. Hope. 3 days later, they reached Jonah's mobile base. Encrypted human communication networks were quieter than Imperial systems. Less flashy. Harder to track. He sent a secure message to a contact in the Human Systems Coalition. Priority 1. Political asylum request. High profile. Possible interstellar consequences. Within hours, Earth responded. Not with fear. With curiosity. That was humanity's most dangerous trait. Curiosity. Meanwhile, across the Etherian Empire, alarm systems activated. The princess's biometric signature had reappeared. Alive. And located inside human-protected territory. Imperial advisors gathered around holographic projections. Humans are primitive, one general scoffed. They will surrender her to maintain trade agreements. But the Emperor did not look convinced. Because humans were new to the galaxy. But they were not weak. On Earth, analysts reviewed fragments of Vilara's preserved data. And their conclusions were terrifying. Her projections were correct. The Etherian Empire was approaching systemic collapse. And when a superpower collapses, it does not fall quietly. It explodes. Jonah stood outside the medical chamber as Vilara underwent advanced treatment. He had meant to live quietly at the frontier. Instead, he had rescued a spark that could ignite a war. Or prevent one. When she emerged, stronger but changed, she looked at him differently. You could have ignored the signal, she said. Yes. Why didn't you? Jonah thought for a moment. Because humans have a bad habit, he said. When someone tries to bury the truth, we dig. Far above them, Imperial warships shifted course. Human diplomats prepared statements. And for the first time in centuries, the Etherian Empire faced something it had never calculated. A species that had already survived its own collapse. And learned from it. This was no longer about one exiled princess. It was about whether truth could outlive power. And humanity had just stepped into the equation. The Etherian Empire did not declare war. It declared concern. 3 days after Vilara's survival became known, a fleet appeared at the edge of human space. Not in attack formation. Not with weapons charged. But present. Silent. Watching. That was how old empires applied pressure. On Earth, the Human Systems Coalition gathered in emergency session. Generals. Economists. Environmental scientists. Cultural historians. Even civilian engineers. Because humans did not see this as only a military issue. They saw a pattern. Vilara stood before them, no longer a dying exile, but a witness. Her silver-blue skin had regained color. Her posture was straight. But her eyes carried the weight of betrayal. They will not attack immediately, she said. They will demand extradition. They will frame this as interference in internal imperial matters. And if we refuse, asked Director Alvarez. Vilara hesitated. They will make an example. Silence filled the chamber. Humans had studied galactic history carefully since first contact. Every major empire followed the same pattern. Expansion. Denial. Overreach. Collapse. Violence. But humans were different. They had collapsed before reaching the stars. And they survived. Jonah stood near the back of the room. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't military. He was just the man who answered a dying signal. But sometimes history turns on ordinary people. Director Alvarez turned to the analysts. Run full-spectrum simulation. If the empire collapses within 20 years, what happens to nearby systems? The projections lit up. Red. Economic shockwaves. Refugee migrations. Military fragmentation. Rogue fleets selling weapons to fringe factions. Trillions affected. If we do nothing, Alvarez said quietly. We inherit the chaos. That was the moment humanity stopped thinking defensively and started thinking strategically. Vilara stepped forward. I did not want a war, she said. I wanted reform. And you still can, Alvarez replied. She blinked. I am no longer a princess. No, Alvarez agreed. You're something far more dangerous. Vilara looked confused. A whistleblower, Jonah said softly. Within hours, humans did something the Empire did not expect. They released Vilara's full economic projections publicly across interstellar networks. Not as accusation. As data. Clear. Verified. Cross-checked by human analysts. They did not insult the Emperor. They did not threaten retaliation. They simply asked a question across the galaxy. What happens when a superpower refuses to prepare for math? The reaction was explosive. Smaller allied species began reviewing their own trade dependencies. Neutral systems requested transparency reports. Independent economists validated Vilara's findings. And something ancient empires feared more than fleets began to spread. Doubt. The Etherian Emperor watched the data cascade across public channels. His advisors demanded immediate action. Strike Earth, one general urged. Make an example. But the Emperor hesitated, because attacking now would validate the projections. And worse, it would prove Vilara right. Meanwhile, humans did not mobilize for war in the traditional way. They mobilized ideas. Earth transmitted an open proposal to the Empire. A restructuring framework. Gradual expansion freeze. Resource regeneration treaties. Shared sustainability technology developed after Earth's own crisis centuries ago. They offered help. Not surrender. Not dominance. Help. Many in the Empire saw it as humiliation. But others, governors in outer territories, economic ministers watching budget deficits grow, saw something else. A lifeline. Vilara sat with Jonah as they monitored the response feeds. You are challenging an empire with spreadsheets, she said. Jonah smiled slightly. Worked for us. You truly restructured your civilization voluntarily. It wasn't pretty, he admitted. There were riots. Political collapse. Energy shortages. But we faced it. We changed consumption models. Shifted to circular economies. Reduced expansion dependency. Vilara studied him carefully. Your species is young. You should be ambitious. Aggressive. We are, Jonah said. But we learned ambition without limits becomes suicide. Across the Empire, a fracture formed. Young officers and economists began sharing human research quietly. Outer systems questioned fleet expenditures. And then something happened no one predicted. An Etherian admiral defected. Not physically. Ideologically. Admiral Sereth publicly stated that the Empire must review its sustainability metrics or risk systemic collapse. He cited Vilara's analysis. And human verification. The Emperor faced a choice. Escalate. Or adapt. Imperial fleets moved closer to human space. Weapons still cold. But tension rising. Earth responded, not by deploying attack ships, but by activating defensive satellites powered by renewable Starcore technology. Non-aggressive. Unbreakable. A message without words. We will not bow. But we do not seek war. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A major mining world within the Empire experienced catastrophic infrastructure failure, exactly matching Vilara's projections. Supply chains froze. Energy grids destabilized. Panic spread. The collapse had begun earlier than predicted. The Emperor's Council demanded emergency military seizure of neighboring systems to compensate. But the numbers no longer supported expansion speed. Human analysts transmitted emergency assistance plans within hours. Not invasion. Aid. Stabilization engineering. Temporary resource support. The galaxy watched. Would the Emperor accept help from the species he once called primitive? Vilara stood before a live transmission feed directed at her father. Her voice was steady. "You exiled me for speaking truth," she said. "But truth does not disappear with the speaker." Humanity listened. Not because they are stronger than us, but because they have already survived what we are facing. The Emperor's expression did not change. But behind him, ministers whispered urgently. Systems were failing. Fleets were overextended. Pride was expensive. And collapse was closer than ever. Jonah watched quietly beside her. "This is the moment," he said softly. "For what?" she asked. "For an empire to decide whether it wants to be remembered as powerful or wise." Silence stretched across interstellar channels. Then, slowly, the Etherian Emperor ordered fleet withdrawal from human borders, and authorized emergency joint talks. It was not surrender, but it was not dominance. It was something rarer. Recognition. Humanity had not fired a shot, had not issued threats, had not flexed military superiority. They had done something far more dangerous. They had offered a better path. And now the Empire stood at a crossroads. Adapt or implode. But deep in the outer systems, not everyone was satisfied. Certain imperial warlords saw reform as weakness. And if the Empire would not defend its pride, they would. The real storm had not yet begun. The Empire agreed to talk. But the Empire was no longer united. While the Emperor opened negotiations with Earth, 3 outer sector warlords made a different decision. If the core would not protect imperial dominance, they would. Admiral Corvath of the Iron Banner Fleet broadcast a message across military channels. Reform is surrender. Cooperation is weakness. Humanity manipulates us with data and shame. We will remind the galaxy why the Etherian Empire ruled for centuries. Within hours, 400 warships broke formation and went rogue. Their target was not Earth. It was one of the unstable mining systems already collapsing. If they seized it quickly, they could prove expansion still worked. They would force the Empire back onto the old path. And they would blame the disaster on human interference. On Earth, alarms sounded. Not because humans were attacked, but because projections updated. If Corvath's fleet destabilized that fragile system, the collapse would accelerate. Refugees would scatter. Supply chains would snap. Neighboring regions would panic. War would spread like fire in dry grass. Vilara stared at the new simulations. "He's trying to restart expansion through fear," she said quietly. "Yes," Director Alvarez replied. "And he believes we won't intervene outside our territory." Jonah folded his arms. "He's betting we think like an empire." Alvarez turned to him. "And do we?" Jonah shook his head. "No. We think like survivors." Human command did not prepare invasion fleets. They did something stranger. They activated the Alios network. The Alios network was humanity's quiet masterpiece. Not a weapon. A stabilizer. After Earth's near collapse centuries ago, humans developed planetary-scale adaptive energy systems, AI-managed grids capable of redistributing power across entire continents in seconds. They scaled it for space. Alios could plug into failing infrastructures and temporarily prevent cascade collapse. It had never been tested on alien systems. Until now. Human vessels jumped, not in battle formation, but in engineering formation. Massive ships filled with stabilizer drones, modular reactors, atmospheric repair platforms. Corvath's fleet arrived at the mining system first. They deployed occupation forces, declared emergency military control. And then the infrastructure failed faster than expected. Energy grids overloaded. Orbital platforms destabilized. Civilian stations drifted. Corvath realized too late. The system was already past the tipping point. His conquest target was a dying star system. Then human ships appeared. Not firing. Not threatening. Deploying. Thousands of small silver drones spread like a wave of light. They latched onto broken stations. Reinforced failing reactors. Redirected plasma flows. Corvus watched in disbelief. They are interfering in Imperial territory, one of his officers shouted. No, Corvus said slowly. They are preventing collapse. Within hours, the downward spiral slowed. Human engineers worked side by side with terrified Etherian technicians. Language barriers did not matter. Math was universal. Vilara transmitted directly to Corvus. You are trying to prove expansion is strength, she said calmly. But you arrived with guns. They arrived with solutions. Corvus's jaw tightened. You weaken us. No, she replied. You confuse pride with power. The turning point came when one of Corvus's own cruisers lost orbit stability due to gravitational fluctuations from the failing system core. Human stabilization drones redirected energy flow to save it. They saved an enemy warship. Without hesitation. Corvus stared at the tactical display. Humans could have let the cruiser fall. They didn't. Because humans did not see collapse as victory. They saw it as waste. Across the galaxy, live feeds spread. Humans stabilizing Imperial systems. Human engineers risking their lives inside failing alien reactors. Not conquering. Repairing. Back on the Imperial capital world, ministers watched in silence. The Emperor spoke quietly. This is what strength looks like. Not dominance. Responsibility. Corvus's fleet fractured. Some captains refused to fire on ships that had just saved their crews. Others powered down weapons voluntarily. Because something uncomfortable was happening. The narrative was breaking. For centuries, the Empire believed power meant expansion and fear. Humans were demonstrating something else. Power meant restraint. Power meant adaptation. Power meant surviving your own mistakes. When the mining system finally stabilized enough to prevent total collapse, human ships did not claim territory. They did not demand tribute. They simply transmitted full repair data to Imperial engineers. And stepped back. Corvus opened a private channel to Vilara. You risked your species for hours. She shook her head gently. No. We prevented a chain reaction that would have hurt everyone. Corvus was silent for a long time. Finally, he gave the order. Iron Banner Fleet, stand down. Across the galaxy, something subtle but profound shifted. The Empire had faced rebellion before. It had crushed dissent before. But it had never faced a species that solved its crisis instead of exploiting it. Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet. Humans understood something important. This was not victory. This was partnership. Vilara stood beside Jonah, overlooking Earth's oceans from orbit. You changed the trajectory of an empire, she said softly. Jonah shook his head. No. You did. We just listened. She looked at the blue planet below. Your species should not exist, she said thoughtfully. Statistically, civilizations collapse before they mature. Jonah smiled. Oh, we collapsed. She looked at him. But we learned. That was the difference. Humanity was not the strongest species. Not the oldest. Not the most advanced. But they were the species that refused to waste a crisis. They turned collapse into curriculum. They turned mistakes into systems. They turned exile into revolution. Weeks later, the Etherian Empire formally signed the Regenerative Accord with the Human Systems Coalition. Expansion froze. Sustainability models adopted. Joint research initiated. And for the first time in Imperial history, growth was redefined, not as conquest, but as balance. Vilara was not restored as princess. She was appointed ambassador of adaptive policy. A new role. Created because of her. Because of humanity. And because sometimes, the most powerful thing in the universe is not a fleet. It is a species stubborn enough to fix what everyone else calls inevitable. The galaxy learned something that cycle. Humans do not win by destroying empires. They win by outlasting their own flaws. And then helping others survive theirs. And somewhere in the archives of the Etherian Empire, a quiet correction was made. Princess Vilara Siren was no longer listed as erased. She was listed as the one who was right. And beside her record, a new entry appeared. Humanity. Status. Unpredictable. Assessment. Dangerous. Reason. They solve the impossible.